Hello there, my fellow learners. So for this video, we will be discussing the topic for the Chapter 6 in the Literacy Training Service, which is all about environmental protection and management. Okay, so let's begin our discussion about this topic. So I will be looking here at this side for my PPT as my reference. Okay, so let's begin discussing all about environmental protection and management. Okay, so we have here the six objectives for this lesson. However, I will not be going to read these objectives in order to minimize the storage or the MB for this video and for this to be easily uploaded. However, you are already provided with our PPT, so you may access these in order to read the springboard of our topic or the objective of this lesson. Okay. Supposedly, we have here an activity entitled Think, Care, Share, in which you guys will be asked some questions in order to unpack our lessons all about the environmental protection and management. Anyway, let's proceed. Okay, so first, let's understand what does environment mean. Okay, according to the UNEP in 2001, environment refers to the totality of external conditions affecting the life, the development, and the survival of all organisms. So it's very understandable that when we say the environment, it is a condition or it is the surrounding in which a living organism lives or operates. It also, we all know that also environment affects how an organism, the plants, the humans, how we survive or how we develop through time. Okay, so it's very self-explanatory what does our environment mean, and it's a very multifaceted concept which includes also the nature, the plants, the trees, and everything around us that help us and shape us or who we are, especially our daily survival. Okay, so second one to define is the ecology. Let's define what does ecology mean. So there is an etymology of the ecology or kung saan na-derive yung term na ecology. Ecology daw comes from the Greek word oikos, which means house, and logos, which means study. It is the scientific study of interrelationship of plants, animals, and environment. So when we say daw ecology, it is the interrelationship of the plants, animals, and the environment. Your interaction or yung pagiging interconnected ng mga plants, animals, and the environment, because we all know that without animals, we will not be able to somehow we will not be able to survive because many are dependent on mga animals, mga foods that come from animals, and also from the things that are offered by the environment. So without environment, without animals, and without those other involved, we will not be able to survive. Okay, so let's proceed to the concept of environmental protection. It is the practices, the beliefs, and then the policies and procedures to safeguard the natural environment. So it's basically, when we say environmental protection, these are the things that aim to protect and safeguard our environment, especially from the harm that we people may have caused. Just for example, the expanding population, it is the very it's one of the key driving factors. It's one of the key driving factors why our environment is being devastated due to the growing population. So due to the growing population, there is an urgent need for mga resources to be utilized, and somehow with the skyrocketing of the population, our resources are being depleted, and oftentimes our environment are being devastated or being overused. Okay, so it's very important that we practice, or we instill in our minds to value those practices, those policies that aim to protect our environment in order for us to live, to have this harmony or harmonic relationship together with our environment, because without our environment, we humans are really nothing. Okay. Okay, let's proceed to environmental management. So when we say environmental management, what does it mean? It is a systematic approach to planning, organizing, directing, and controlling activities that impact the environment. So when we say environmental management, this involves managing managing, directing, and organizing activities that aim to control activities that impact our environment. For instance, ang pagtatapon ng mga basura. So, with that, it is under the environmental management in which niregulate natin yung pagtatapon ng basura, especially in observing the proper segregation of waste from reuse, reduce, recycle, mga ganon, and then yung mga biodegradable, non-biodegradable, recyclable, and etc. So rini-recycle, I mean sinisegregate natin iyon in order to properly manage the waste, which can cause harm to our environment if hindi natin ito nagawa, or if we are not going to properly throw our garbages or properly segregate our garbages, it can harm our environment and also as humans. Okay. Now, what is the main goal of the environmental management? According to here, its aim is to protect biodiversity, ensure sustainable resource use, and preserve ecosystems for future generations. So, hindi lang yung goal ni environmental management na para lang sa atin ngayon, kundi for the preservation of the environment para sa mga future generations din. And then, it also protects biodiversity, yung iba't ibang klase or the different forms of life in our environment, mapa-animals man yan o kahit na ano pa mang klaseng form of life yan. The environmental management aims to protect those in order na mas manorish pa natin yung ating environment para mas kumaga mas mamimit pa natin yung mga needs natin in that environment, and also para ma-preserve natin iyan for the future generation. So that's how important the environmental management is, and that's also how important or imperative the environment is in our lives as humans. Okay. Now, the role of the youth. Youth as effective stewards of the environment. Literacy on eco-friendly practices starts at home. Active participation in sustainable activities can multiply effects at community level, and then it builds skills, responsibility, and proactive citizenship. Now, in the subject of the LTS, especially when we are talking in the context or in the topic of the environmental management, the role of the youth is really evident, and the role of the youth should be really addressed, or should be really done, or should really be met, because the role of the youth really plays pivotal role in managing our environment. Why? Because youth daw can be an effective stewards of the environment. So we as students, we are part of the youth, and then with our knowledge on how to protect, on how to safeguard, on how to achieve those sustainable practices, we will be able to contribute or to take part in protecting our environment. And then also the very important thing there is the knowledge or the literacy on eco-friendly. So if we have the knowledge on how to segregate waste, on how to protect our environment, then we can be an active agents of change, and then we can also contribute to the greater change of our community. And mind you guys, that these sustainable practices really start at home. So dapat from now, so while we are at home, we should apply those practices, those knowledge that we have learned from school, kagaya ng pagtatapon ng basura sa mga tamang lalagyan, sa mga and other things na minsan ay binabaliwala natin or linalabag natin. Okay, so so sa pamamagitan daw ng mga active participation, we will be able to achieve this success in the community level in terms of environmental protection and management. And then it builds skills, responsibility, and proactive citizens. So if we are throwing our garbages properly, or if we are engaging especially in this pursuit of knowledge, especially in this LTS, whether in the context of environmental management and protection, then we will be able to become proactive citizens. Because if we are proactive citizens, then we are not just thinking of ourselves, but we are considering on how our actions can impact our community or our environment as a whole. Okay. Now, let's proceed to the 7 environmental principles. So, there are 7 environmental principles, and these principles are really our compass toward achieving or toward having this harmonious relationship with our environment. Because diba, it's also stated in the 1987 Constitution that there should have a there should have a balanced relationship between the humans and also the environment. So we should not deplete the resources, we should not devastate our environment, but if we are going to take some part of it, we should make sure that we can contribute something in order for it to gain back its power or to gain back its resources para hindi siya maubos, hindi siya ma-deplete. Okay. So first environmental principle is nature knows best. Okay. It follows natural processes, human disruptions cause imbalance. Okay. So this phrase that nature knows best is very familiar sa atin. Kasi alam natin that nature really knows what's best for it. So it follows really natural processes, and then the human activities sometimes or oftentimes disrupt it. Example, when mangroves are cut down for fish ponds, the coastal areas lose natural protection, leading to stronger flooding and erosion. So if kinakat natin yung mangroves, then it can lead to soil erosion. That's why we should let the nature follow its natural processes because it knows what is best for it. Okay? So nature knows best. Second is all forms of life are important. Okay? Every organism has a role, even those what we call unlovely ones. Example, bees may look small, but without them pollinating crops, many fruits and vegetables would disappear from our tables. Okay, so dito daw, all forms of life are important. No matter gaano man kaliit, no matter gaano kapangit sa paningin natin yung isang living organism, remember na all forms of life are important. They play pivotal role. Maybe hindi lang natin alam. Just for example, bees. Bees may look small, but they really have this pivotal role in our lives because without them, then there would be no longer pollinators na magpo-pollinate sa mga plants, especially to those plants that can produce food na kailangan natin sa pang-araw-araw natin na buhay. Okay, so we should value all forms of life because they are equally important. Maybe hindi lang natin alam. That's why we should be knowledgeable kung ano yung mga important role na piniplay nila sa ating buhay. Okay, third is everything is connected. Biotic and abiotic factors interact, disturbing one affects all. Okay, so dito daw, the third environmental principle is that everything is connected. Connected ang lahat. The biotic factors, which includes those mga living organism or once living organism which are part of the ecosystem, just like the plants, the animals, or the bacteria. And also the abiotic factors, which are the non-living physical and chemical components of an ecosystem. For example, yung mga water, sunlight, soil, and etc. So they are interconnected and they need each other. Or if one is being disrupted, then it can affect the whole totality of the environment or the surrounding. Especially that the biotic factors or the living organism depend sa mga abiotic factors in order to survive. Okay. Now, the fourth one is everything changes. So that's the fourth environmental principle. Everything changes. Environment evolves, but human activities accelerate harmful changes. Okay, so change is constant, and even in the environment, yung pagbabago talaga ay hindi naiiwasan. And then, environment really evolves, but human activities oftentimes contribute to harmful changes. What are the examples? I mean, what is one of the best examples? Of course, the climate change, which is caused also by human activities. Diba? According sa Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, that human activities increase the climate change. Okay. Example, forests naturally regrow after fires, but illegal logging prevents recovery, leaving barren land for decades. Okay. So dito, meron talagang mga processes na nagpapakita that our environment really evolves. However, due to people's disruption or human activities that really destroy our environment, minsan yung ating environment ay talagang nasisira, and it leaves, for instance, if grabe na yung illegal logging, it leaves our land barren and hindi na siya sustainable or hindi na siya kumbaga nagfo-flourish, especially for decades, mga ganon. So may long-term bad effect siya sa ating environment. Okay, so let's proceed to the fifth principle. Everything must go somewhere. Waste doesn't disappear, it ends up elsewhere, pollutant or resource. Example, a plastic bottle tossed on the street doesn't vanish. It clogs drainage, causes flooding, or breaks down into microplastics that pollute the sea. Okay, so everything, kung yung mga basura na ating itinatapon, we should not think na dyan lang yan, mananatil lang yan dyan. It's because everything must go somewhere. So for instance, if tayo nagtatapon ng mga plastics, we should remember that these plastics can go somewhere, especially it can go sa mga ocean, which can disrupt the ecosystem or the marine life. So, we should be responsible and accountable sa ating mga actions or sa ating mga ginagawa towards our environment. Kasi lahat ng ating itinatapon, iyon ay may patutunguhan, especially that it can really, really destroy our environment, in which, in return, can also affect us. Okay, let's proceed to the sixth environmental principle, which is ours is a finite earth. Resources are limited. Renewables stay renewable if not overused. So, what does it mean by sabi dito na our earth is finite one, meaning it is limited, may hangganan yung ating environment or yung earth na kinabibilangan natin is may hangganan. Therefore, kapag yung mga renewables, those renewables stay renewable if not overused. Pero kapag yung mga renewables ay nagiging overused, then they will be no longer called renewables. Kaya dapat balance lang yung trato natin sa ating kalikasan. And then according to here, resources are limited, which is very correct. Kasi resources are limited, that's why kapag nasosobrahan yung paggamit ng mga tao or yung pagkuha ng mga tao sa kalikasan, nasisira ito at tayo din ay naaapektuhan at maraming mga environmental problems na uma-arise kapag ito ay naapektuhan or nagiging depleted. Okay, example, overfishing in Philippine seas reduces fish supply, forcing communities to travel farther and spend more just to catch enough food. So, dito sa Philippines, we all know that our country is rich in marine life or marine biodiversity such as mga isda. So, kapag patuloy na nagpe-persist yung overfishing in the Philippines, therefore, there is a high probability na mawawala or ma-extinct or mauubos yung ating mga isda rito, and then it will lead to mga shortage sa mga food supply, kaya we might no travel pa sa mga farther and then spend more para lang makakuha ng mga resources na yun or ng mga isda or ng mga marine resources, kaya wag nating itong i-deplete. Okay, so the last one or the seventh principle is that nature is beautiful and we are stewards. Of course, don't you agree with that, guys? That nature is very beautiful and we are just stewards of God's creation, or we are just stewards of nature. Humans are caretakers and not exploiters of God's creation. Okay, do you agree with me? Do you agree with the statement that we are just caretakers and not exploiters? Pero sa mga nakikita natin ngayon, the humans are being the exploiters, are being the main foes of our environment. That's why we should start taking step para maipakita natin that we are deserving stewards of the environment. Okay, example, the Benawi rice terraces thrived for centuries because generations cared for them, showing how people and nature can coexist. So, best example daw yun in showing that people and the environment can coexist. Pero, paano magkakaroon ng healthy relationship si people or tayo at ang environment na kinabibilangan natin if we are being irresponsible or we are being arrogant, or kung masyado tayong nagtitake for granted sa ating environment, di ba? So, it may lead to not just disruption in the natural processes or not just destruction to the environment, but also to the devastation of the people. Okay. Let's remember na kapag nasira yung ating environment, maari din tayong maapektuhan nun. Kagaya ngayon, dahil sa ating mga pinagagagawa kapag yung umuulan ng malakas, wala na mga puno na sisip-sip sa mga tubig, kaya mas lalong nagkakaroon tayo ng baha. For example, yung sabi kanina, yung sa mga mangroves really play important role, especially sa mga flood. Then kapag wala yun, if yun ay nakat dahil sa mga human activities, then tayo din ang mga apektuhan. Okay. So that would be all. So let's just always remember that environmental protection and management is really important, especially sa ating mga youth, and we should apply those seven environmental principles in order for us to become responsible and proactive stewards of the environment. Okay, so that would be all, and that's all for my part in this discussion. And I hope you learned something about environmental protection and management. Thank you guys. Bye bye.